Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Sydney's lost, we're surrounded, and we're suffering unsustainable casualties.
There's something else. Over the past few weeks, I've encountered sources that all speak of some event. Rainfall.
Find out what this rainfall thing is. Fall back to me.
I will go too.
I'm seeing you fight. You're keeping something from me.
I am a soldier, Matthew. Just like you.
What are they doing? Preparing for war, eh? It's their technology integrated with ours. It's a beautiful thing.
I've hidden from this war long enough. I'm going to make sure you complete your mission.
You are surrounded. You cannot win.
Oh, that's not good.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 319. Releasing today, January 28, in cinemas across Australia is Occupation Rainfall, the sequel to the 2018 film Occupation, in which a ragtag group of misfits battle against alien invaders in country New South Wales. 2 years on, the war has escalated as the human resistance and their unlikely allies uncover a plot that can see the war come to a decisive end. A big action sci-fi spectacle of immersive craft, Occupation Rainfall again reminds of the skill, ingenuity, and rich imagination that can be found in Australian genre filmmaking, with director Luke Sparke leading a new charge of filmmakers, continuing the proud tradition of Aussie-made genre movies that the likes of George Miller and Alex Proyas established years ago. And joining me now for the third time on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is the director of Occupation Rainfall, Luke Sparke. Luke, thank you very much for joining me today.
That's okay. Happy to be here.
So the last time you and I spoke on this podcast was on the eve of when the first Occupation film was to be released. And when I was listening back to that interview, it was really interesting in that interview you were telling me that pre-production on Rainfall had already begun. In fact, you said you were sitting in your office, you're surrounded by storyboards, you were in the first week of pre-production, and here we are now 2 years later, the film's out in cinemas. I got to ask, what's it been like for you these last couple of years? Because with every film that you've done since Red Billabong onwards, the films have become bigger, budgets have become bigger, interest in it have become bigger as well. So what's it been like for you in the last 2 years making this movie, which by far is the biggest thing that you've put your name to?
Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question. But look, many different facets. Like doing this film was the hardest thing I've probably ever done, and the thing here as well has probably ever done. We came up against pretty much every hurdle you could possibly come up against. We were trying to make, a massive feeling sci-fi film, independently. All these different problems, and then with problems come solutions. But all that has to be worked out on a day-to-day basis. So it's been the most challenging 3 years of my life. I can say that much.
Let's talk about the film as a whole. It's a continuation of the first movie. It is set 2 years later, and many things have happened in that time with these characters. And you can tell just by revisiting these characters again, they've gone through many different experiences, and there's an evolution in the characters too. The first character I want to talk about is Matt Simmons, who's played by Dan Ewing. And Dan Ewing, this is his third movie you've done with him. The first time we see him in the first Occupation film, he goes through a transition, and he's gone through a transition again. He's much more of a kind of like a hardened soldier now, battle-scarred, weary, grisly, still has some of that kind of spunk and attitude towards him, but much more, I think, when I watch him, I think he's much more kind of like in almost the Mad Max kind of realm. He's even got that kind of sawed-off shotgun as well to go with it. When you're dealing with these characters in their evolution, do you have backstories written as to what's happened with them in the last 2 years, and do your actors kind of contribute to that as well?
Yeah. So with each character, I have to really dive into their backstory. and then send that to the actors, and then we'll get together and talk about what they think. But yeah, each character does, we do have to make sure that as a unique, or as much as I can in a film like this, a unique point of view and a unique backstory for each character. And you're right, Matt's character, went through a little transition in the first movie. I really wanted to use him as a device to really have drive home the alien war and what he thinks of the aliens and what they think of him and all that kind of stuff.
And there's an interesting kind of plot twist to this all, in that, in sort of a way, their Occupation Rainfall is almost like a buddy comedy kind of film as well. And what I mean by that is that you have Matt's character, he kind of teams up with an alien ally by the name of Gary. And he's played by Lawrence McCauley, and he's been in films like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. He's really great in doing that kind of practical creature feature acting kind of work that he does in this film. You've given more screen times to the aliens in this movie. When you deal with those kind of characters as well, how do you approach kind of like their motivations and such as well? Is there a backstory for them as well in this film?
Yeah, there's a huge backstory for the aliens, and I keep trying to, put little bits of pieces and breadcrumbs out there every time I go and look at doing an occupation film. This one definitely much more than the first one, and even on set, we've upgraded and made sure our aliens are much more realistic and much more sort of photorealistic with the actors and the cast compared to the first movie. But yeah, each character again has a backstory. I know, obviously, being the creator, I know where they're from and the different moons that they might live on and the different species, and I have to dive into all that. But I didn't want to get bogged down too much exposition and have to stand there and explain every single character and every single different species. Just like, great movies like Star Wars or other alien films, it's just there. They're just living in the world. It's world building, and that's I'm very interested in the world building aspect of making movies. So yeah, that's where the aliens backstory comes into it.
When it comes to how the aliens are presented, how much of it is practical effects? How much of it is CGI? Is Lawrence actually walking around with the alien mask on him, and then later in post you kind of add like little dimensions to it?
Yep. With Lawrence, there's times where he's wearing a practical mask and we're adding dimensions to it. There's times where he's wearing a mask and it was all done practically, and there's times where he was on set with dots on his face and we did mocap, and we had to blend all those three together to try to make it as seamless as we possibly could.
Another element to the film relates to the dynamics of war, the ethics and rules of engagement with the enemy. And sometimes in that, the good guys do bad things. And I really like that about the film. I found it grounds the film. It gives it kind of real world stakes. And before you did Red Billabong, you did like work kind of like in documentary kind of style work, especially in kind of like World War One era, the era of World War One. How many stories and such did you take from that era of wartime and place it into your own screenplay, especially in regards to, war, the ethics of war and the consequences of those ethics?
Yeah. I mean, thank you for picking up on that. And there was a big point that I worked with. As you pointed out, I do have a background in military history more often than not, and it's something that really interests me. And I'm a big history buff, and I'm always reading up on. From different aspects of World War II, at the back, and tried to mix that in to make, as you pointed out, a bit more grounded military. Because I mean, I'm a huge fan of our military as well. I'm not trying to put them down at all, because I've got characters in there that obviously do take different sides. There's the military and there's the Air Force, but everyone has their own different opinion. Because look at even just the past. Like, you wouldn't think. Of course, people would do experimentations on aliens. Of course, they would try to, just wipe them out. I mean, you got these crazy characters like these Vox that they ride on across the country, and later on you see them in these horrible pens getting mutilated and whatever. Of course, that would happen. Like, I think at this point in time in human history, I think we would be pretty naive to think that someone wouldn't try to do something like that. There's all these amazing animals that we've wiped out for the last couple of 100 years as well. So, all that was pretty important to me to try to ground it, because I was trying to think from different characters' point of views. It's a big part of the film is I looked at World War II, and if, yes, we had a nuclear weapon that, ended the war in Japan, but if someone had developed a weapon that said we could wipe out all Japanese people or German people to wipe them out forever, I think that would be a much more horrible consequence, because I don't think our armed forces or people or humanity would go for that, because it's not. Just because Hitler was a dictator doesn't mean that there was millions of Germans that didn't agree with him.
Yeah.
So I really sort of leaned on that aspect when it came to the aliens and how they're going to try to, evolve into our society.
The film, of course, is bigger in size and in scope, and because of that, there's opportunity to bring in new tech in the mix. I mean, the scenes with alien battleships and different weaponry and hardware, I just absolutely love that kind of stuff. How do you come up with the designs for this? Do you come up with this stuff on your own? Do you have a scrapbook of ideas that you've compiled over the years? Do you work with other people? How do you get all that kind of ideas on the page and then onto the screen?
Well, luckily for me, a lot of because we're working independently, one big aspect that does allow me to evolve my stories as I go. There's no set structure of this is where you're going to begin the film and this is where you're going to end the film, and we know exactly what's going to happen throughout the process of the next 2 years. And there's your funding and go. I was able to, sit back and once edited the film, sit back and sort of watch it a million times over and come up with different shots that I might, as you pointed out, new ships, new tech here and there. I do have a scrapbook. I would sketch all these different designs myself, and then I would pass that on to concept artists and our visual effects people, and then they would come up with something even better. And I'm very collaborative when it comes to situations like that. I just come up with ideas, and I have a great team around me that can help build those ideas. But again, world building is something that's interesting to me, so I want to adding things in even 2 weeks before we had to deliver the film to cinemas. So I was using every single moment I possibly could to cram as much interesting stuff I could in there.
It's really interesting how there's one brand of alien soldier. It almost seemed to me kind of almost like an Imperial Guard kind of soldier, to use a Star Wars reference. And the really cool thing with them is that they have these swords. I won't call it a lightsaber because it's not that, but clearly there is definitely that kind of influence there, because I know you're a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah, and look, it's and not to take away anything from this film, but I may never get a chance to direct a Star Wars film. I would love to, and always in the back of my mind every day was this might be your only chance to do a big sci-fi film, so do it the best you can and do it whatever you think you would like to play with and what you think other people would like to see. And that was my mantra every day on set. And so, there's obviously influences, but I think I took a lot of influence as well from samurai warriors and stuff here on Earth as well. It just happens to be that lightsabers are the most go-to recognizable thing, probably film history. But it turns into axes, and I want to continue that as well. If I do get another one of these movies, I'd like to try to bring in more tech.
And the tech, and it looks fantastic as well. And I got to come up with the next question. I imagine the post-production process on this film will be a massive undertaking. The visual effects shots, or the sound effects especially, absolutely terrific. I absolutely loved it all. It really sucks you into this world that you built. Post-production wise, how big of an undertaking was this? And for you, going into this post-production process in this film and having finished it up now, what are the biggest lessons you kind of learn into that type of filmmaking process?
Oh my God. That's a big question. I've learned a lot, and because we're so understaffed being an independent film, I really had to basically learn every aspect of post-production, which some directors don't have to do because you have a team. You walk in, even on Red Billabong, my very first film, we had a post company that did that for us, and I just walk in there and I'd sit and watch the edit, give my notes, and then walk out, and they would then spend weeks doing things behind the scenes that I didn't need to know about to make it to the screens. This time I was forced with our budgetary restrictions to do everything myself. So I had to do the edit, but I also had to then do offline edits and online edits, and how to compile edits to send to our sound team, and how to all these different facets. I've never had anything experience in my life, and I had to like learn it all myself as I went along. And it was me and my visual effects supervisor, Alex Beckensall, sitting here in our office and all of this stuff, and we were learning as we went. And then we got the visual effects supervisors in to talk to us in Sydney and doing remotely during COVID. And they would obviously be really helpful and tell us, you should do this and do that. And I think it's great that they're willing to help. And I was just upfront and just said, look, guys, I've never done this aspect before, so you just have to talk me through it. And they did. But luckily those teams were so prepared on their own end that they were able to help us and snap into it. And yes, you're right. The sound design done by Chris Goods, who actually did the sound design for The Dry, Penguin Bloom, and High Ground, and they're all coming out in January along with this film. So he's kind of stoked that he's got a massive lineup of his films. But yes, we worked together probably for the last year, just on and off, and then a big chunk in the middle of it. But just last year, just sending each other clips and sounds of things we liked, and just came up with these cool concepts. So that was a real fun aspect of it.
Having talked to you over the years in your different films, it really seems to me your evolution of a filmmaker has just grown and grown and grown. Hopefully there will be another occupation film to follow this one. Now that you've learned so much from this film, especially in the post-production process and working on a bigger budget, bigger scope, bigger size, how much more confident are you now in that type of filmmaking, where hopefully it comes to the next chapter of your story?
Yeah, look, I'm super ready for it. I'm super confident now, knowing all the process and knowing from A to B. I mean, I'm even the guy cutting the trailers and cutting the TV ads and working with the companies to do billboards on the side of the road because we don't have anyone else here. So I've learned all the aspects up until the release day. So I kind of know the whole thing now from where to go. So I'm ready to go on the next one. I'm super confident, and I can feed into it and really sort of take everything from the last two films and two occupation films and Billabong and really apply it to hit the next one even higher.
The first time we spoke when it came to Red Billabong, you were talking about the struggle to get Australian genre films in cinemas. And, now we're in kind of like in a different situation now because of the whole COVID situation and the opening and closing of cinemas. Now the game is to get people back in cinemas, and you can tell that people are just ready for that. Films like The Dry and Penguin Bloom, both Australian-made films, both rocketing to the top of the Australian box office. People are ready to watch Aussie films. Your film, however, gives them an opportunity to see a different type of movie. Blockbusters haven't been in the cinemas for a long time. You're going to give them an opportunity to see something big, spectacular, and above all, Australian-made as well. How confident are you in the release of this film? Because I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people are waiting for a film like this. They're waiting for an experience like this in the cinema, and I think they're really going to gobble up and have fun with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. It's a hard question to ask any filmmaker what's going to happen, especially day one of release. Like, I haven't slept in 2 days. I'm so nervous about the whole situation because, like, you're right, it's a whole different experience, a whole different time. This COVID thing has got huge opportunities. Would this film have got this big of a release without COVID? I don't know. I think the film stands on its own two legs, but it definitely provides an opportunity now with COVID to have like over 200 cinemas for this sort of film. I think is a great opportunity. I just really don't know if people are going to turn up or not. I really hope they do, obviously.
So for everyone out there listening, Occupation Rainfall in Australian cinemas right now, I highly, highly recommend you check out this movie. Big, spectacular sci-fi action filmmaking. It's a kind of movie that we've been, just absent from for such a long time in cinemas. It's time to get back into the cinemas. It's time to also support Australian filmmakers, and this is a movie for it. And Luke Sparke, thank you very much again for your time. Third time on the show. I'm such a big fan and champion of your work and your films, and I thank you again for your time today.
So thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.